Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Returning to the Office Part 1, Practical Tips, Tools, and Guidance. I'm Musa Akel, Knotel's Director of Marketing, and I'll be moderating today's session. Thank you all for taking some time out of your day to join us. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe. We've got some great content that we're planning to cover over the next 30 minutes. I think you'll find helpful and valuable. We've got actually two of Knotel's sharpest minds on the line today who I'll introduce here in a second. Excited to hear from them. Want to just quickly cover the agenda, do some housekeeping, and then we'll turn it over to the ladies. Also, we're gonna try to keep today's session interactive as always. So I'm gonna launch a poll if you'll oblige me. For those of you on the line, get a quick poll going while we cover the agenda. Again, we're going to go for 30 minutes today. We will, as always, carve out time towards the end to do some live Q&A. So submit those either through your Zoom portal or email content@knotel.com with questions or feedback. We'll try to cover those at the end or reach out to you personally if we don't have time to cover those as well. Thanks for those of you who are filling out the poll. This is obviously a topic that everyone has been talking about, returning to the office, returning to your workspace. One that obviously has kind of captured the imagination of not only the world, but also corporate executives, people just like you on the line, heads of real estate, HR executives who are feverishly working to build their return to work plans, obviously with an emphasis on safety and continuity. So we've got some practical, tactical things that you all hopefully can start to incorporate in your own respective plans, and we're of course happy to help you as well. So we'll end the poll. Thank you all for that. We're going to do two more before the end of the session. Again, we're going to talk about changing priorities. A lot has changed in the last 2.5, 3 months. We're going to talk about, of course, physical workspace, something that is near and dear to our heart, but also how do you prepare your team mentally, culturally, psychologically, obviously a big factor of returning. And of course, where to start. We've got a pretty nifty checklist that I think you'll find helpful as well. And then again, we will leave time towards the end to hear from Christina and Maylin. Make sure to get those questions in. Christina and Maylin, thank you. As always, I know you guys have been busy the last couple months, heads down, talking to customers all around the globe, helping them craft their plan. So excited to hear some of those insights over the course of today's session. Why don't you guys do a little quick intro, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Musa. So my name is Christina. I lead our workplace strategy and design team here in New York. Before coming to Knotel, I worked at Gensler for quite a bit of time doing workplace design and strategy for lots of different clients there. But my team here at Knotel focuses on customer experience all the way through, like when they're shopping for space and then throughout their design process, and then being there really as a resource throughout their whole time with us.
Hi, I'm Maylin. I have spent my career working in other real estate startups prior to coming to Knotel, including another co-working startup called Spacious, and then a residential business called One Fine Stay. And here at Knotel, I've worked on the product strategy team previously, and now I run our business unit that manages our design services and modular furniture line.
So we spent, to what Musa said, we spent the last couple months doing lots of conversations, getting lots of information from our customers. And I think a lot of what you'll hear today focuses around two big priorities that keep being the thing we hear over and over again, and I'm sure everyone on this call has heard. But those two priorities are really around health and safety. And I think that's like the most immediate one, is how are we coming back safe? And how are we making people feel safe? And then the other one that we keep hearing is really around social and collaborative spaces and the ability to do that with your colleagues. And the importance there is just like, that's the stuff people can't do at home. So how do we think about the future of work, like in the near term, and bring people back safely, but also empower them to do the things that they're really missing at home?
So I think with those two priorities in mind, there's a few things that come to mind when we're talking about how to prepare. And the first one being, how do you deal with your physical workspace? And at Knotel, we've been talking about a lot of things about the long-term future of work and workplace design and what that looks like and what changes might happen across changes to the open office plan and the way that people think about designing space. But based on this feedback that we got from running a survey across primarily office workers in the US with a few participants from Europe, hearing the things about their immediate concerns about returning to the office actually leads us to a lot of practical things that can be done to your existing space prior to that. So the things that we have heard from our customers as well as some other participants outside of Knotel is that many people are actually eager to come back to the workspace, although they do have a few concerns about their safety and wellness when they return. And only a small portion, I think that comes out to 8%, actually feel uncomfortable with returning at all for the next 6 months. And a lot of those concerns come around the cleaning procedures, as well as continuing to have flexibility to work from home as a way to manage occupancy inside of that space. And only a few were really looking for some of those more extreme measures to take by their employers in the workspace. And so with that feedback, we started to think about what we can do inside of the existing space without having to break the bank with changes made. We don't have to do rebuilds. We don't have to introduce a bunch of new private offices. There's actually a few things that can be done today in preparation for bringing your teams back to the office that are pretty light lift, but I think address most of these concerns. So some of those things actually have to do with the density. Over the past several years, several decades of office design, you've seen an increase in density into the workspace for efficiency of the use of that real estate. But now with this, after this experience and learning about the 6 foot or 1.5 meter rules about social distancing, there's concerns about how tightly we can sit next to each other at 48 and 60-inch desks. And so it can be really expensive, particularly if you have hardwired desks across your space to actually go through an entire refit of your space. And so there's behavioral things that we can do and signals that we can implement into the workspace that will encourage the right behaviors from your teams without having to completely redesign everything. And so that might look like encouraging employees to sit every other desk, including across the bank, so that they're not sitting directly face to face with each other on those rotating schedules, perhaps introducing and eliminating some of the uses of the conference room spaces to lower the occupancy that maybe we're accustomed to packing people into those rooms, or just changing their use outright, and with lower occupancy, encouraging teams to sit out more in the open collaborative spaces as a way to mitigate that close proximity inside of those rooms, and or using them as phone booths, as we might have concerns about using those tightly enclosed spaces in the future.
Yeah, Maylin, it's interesting. I've seen some charts, I think, in the Wall Street Journal that have shown this trend of densification that you speak to over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I think it used to be maybe close to 250 square foot per person and has dipped below 200. Is it a safe assumption that we think this new trend, what they call de-densification, is probably going to, at least for the short term, take over in terms of making sure that there's more space per employees within an office?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think one of the ways that we're thinking about that is we don't really know what the long-term impact is going to be. I think that there might be a reversion overall of going back closer to 200 square feet per person inside of the office design in itself. But right now, when we're operating in spaces that are designed between 100 and 130 square feet, there are ways that we can manage that without having to fully redo all of the desks. And I think the way that we're encouraging our customers to consider that is as we don't know what the future looks like, and we also don't know how long it will take to see those results. The practical way to manage this is to manage it through behaviors in the short term, and then measure and anticipate what long-term changes might need to happen as we see what reopening really looks like in real time.
Great. And we're going to talk a little bit more about occupancy later. We've got, there are some publicly traded companies that you all know who have started to share some of their return to workspace plans, and we'll share what those numbers are, those actual occupancy numbers are, in a little bit.
Mhm. So including density, wellness is really important, and what are the cleaning measures that are being taken inside of the space, I think is top of mind for employees. And a bigger concern, I think, that might provide hesitancy for people in coming back at all is understanding what you're doing and communicating clearly with your teams, I think is a really great way to provide comfort to them of what we're doing and how important it is to you as the employer to keep your team safe. And there are very basic things that can be done that largely can improve cleaning practices in your workspace. And so what we're doing for our customers in advance of their return is making sure that we're doing an HVAC check across all of our spaces and filter change in advance of the return, not only because it's warmer weather, but also because airflow is really important for keeping people safe and reducing the spread of germs. And as well as we're introducing hand sanitizer stations around entry points and high traffic areas into the workspace. And other things that you can consider are introducing wellness stations that include cleaning supplies that teammates can self-manage, cleaning their own workspaces. So as you have these rotating schedules or sitting every other desk, I think that there's a lot of comfort for myself, even knowing that before I come in, before I sit down and start my workday, I have the opportunity and ability to wipe down my surfaces with a disinfectant and know for myself that all the things that I'm going to be touching are clean before I get to work. And one other interesting thing that we've heard from a lot of customers that has been requested that I think is a really interesting thing to consider, especially when you're considering what might be the best use of some of those conference rooms and things like that with a smaller team returning, is bike racks have actually been requested by a lot of customers as they think about their teams finding alternative ways to actually commute to the office without having to take public transportation. Bringing bikes and having a place to store them for their team is a way to encourage people to safely find ways to commute into the office.
Great. So once you figure out the space part, the next part is really figuring out how to prepare your team to use that new space. One of the things, like even before all of this, but just like knowing design and helping companies create new ways of working or different strategies that they never did before, such as unassigned seating or all these things, like change management is always key. And communication across everything that you're doing is really how it's going to work effectively. So I think one of the first steps that we've taken by reaching out to our customers, but also on ourselves internally, is just identifying what people are most excited to come back to. And by understanding that, it really helps you craft your message around behaviors and new norms that are kind of centered around that. So if people are really excited about coming back because they can't work with their team in the way they want to when they're home, you want to make sure that you're preparing for that and you're communicating around how are you doing that safely in the office, whether that's like reducing how many people are in rooms or other things that we'll get into, but just really targeting your communication strategies around what people are excited to come back to, because it gives it a positive message with a little more excitement than just going like to the scary end of what people are thinking around safety and health.
Yeah, Christina, it's not surprising to me to see here the top 4 responses on the left all have to deal with, like, we just miss the other humans. We miss our colleagues. We miss our friends. I know I feel that way. I'm sure you guys feel the same way. So it's been obviously a very difficult 2.5 months. So, not surprised to see that people miss their colleagues, and there's a lot of magic that can happen with the human to human interaction and being in the same room. So
yeah, for sure. The office lives on. The office is not dead. So I think one of the things around that is really reducing occupancy. So again, by understanding what people are excited to come back to, and then also understanding how your specific teams work. Every organization is different, but certain teams might make sense to come back quicker. And to do that is really just to help reduce occupancy. So deciding what those teams are is really important. So maybe the teams that are really missing face-to-face interaction more, or the teams that work with physical product that really can't do that at home, are the ones that make a lot more sense. But by reducing occupancy in the office, being strategic by who and when they're coming back, and then also just considering the different needs of teams, and when they're in the space, reducing the occupancy of potentially conference rooms and other spaces.
I'm going to leave it here, Christina, for a second, because I want to launch another poll question real quick while I talk about occupancy, as I said we would. So if you guys don't mind, for those of you interested, take the poll, help us get some data and get your feedback. So I think the average occupancy, let's just rewind maybe to a year ago on a regular Tuesday. I think industry averages for occupancy within an average office maybe hovered around 75, 80% on a regular day. Not everyone's in the office. People have been working remotely and working from home before the pandemic started. I think that'll obviously increase post-pandemic, but it won't be 100%, of course. But so think about average occupancy, pre-pandemic at 70, 80%. We've seen, by the way, we've been doing this Flex Forward series. So our CEO, Mal Sarva, had a chance to speak to Uber's head of real estate, Mike Huko, a couple weeks ago. And he mentioned on that line, I think he said 20% occupancy. So occupancy, I think, is going to be one of the most interesting things, and probably one of the earlier things you'll see. You'll notice this is called part one. There's obviously quite a bit of material when you think about returning to work, but one of the early things you can do is just restrict the number of people in the office. And so I think Uber said 20%. We just saw, just within the last 2 days, Google announced their return to work plan. They are going to do 10% occupancy on July 6th and then start to move towards about 30% right after Labor Day. So you start to see the slow opening. And then, of course, there are companies like Twitter and Square who famously in the last 2 weeks have announced that some employees who are eligible can work from home forever. But I think what's worth noting there is that Twitter didn't say they're getting rid of their offices. They're actually going to keep their offices, but they're just giving employees more flexibility, which is what you saw, I think, a couple of slides ago on what employees want most right now is flexibility. So this idea of occupancy and phased return, how many people will actually be in the office, in the building? It looks like it's going to be sub 50% for quite a while until companies start to iterate and learn and then get a little bit better about that. So definitely want to keep an eye on that.
Yeah. And then once you've figured out, what the occupancy is that you have, whether that's like the amount of teams that need to come back, or if you just have a number in mind, that's like, if you plan for every other desk, like Malin talked about earlier, like what is that number and how do you potentially rotate people? But again, can't stress like how important communication is right now, especially around reaching out and getting that information from people. We've been doing a lot of that. We've been doing a lot of internal polling, and for our customers of just like one question a day, right? Like, what do you miss? What are you most worried about? All these things that'll really help you decide potentially what teams are coming back or which, or what kind of schedule you're going to take. So there's the team method, like we talked about, but then there's also the flexible schedule method. And I think initially, when we first talked about this, and I know when others that I've heard talking about it, we're thinking like every other day or a couple of days a week, because of where we are in this entire global pandemic. We have, I guess we're fortunate, I don't want to say fortunate, but fortunate enough to see how it's going with some of our colleagues in Europe. And a lot of people are testing out, instead of doing like the every other day or even every other week, doing 2-week increments of just like a team that's on for 2 weeks and then a team that's off for 2 weeks, which then gives kind of that 2-week in between in case there is any kind of a situation that happens or virus that is like someone tests positive for COVID. So that's like one of the strategies that we've seen people testing. So I think, again, like it is helpful, especially for us, because we do have colleagues in Europe who are working with companies ahead of where we are. We're just trying to communicate and learn as much as we can about what they're doing and what they're seeing companies do and what's working best. And then again, signage and behavior change. So this is really where the change management part comes into play, by helping people with new social norms, hand washing, where cleaning supplies are, again, to some of the stuff Malin talked about of wellness stations and things around that. There's like rules or guidelines or policies around that too. And you want to make sure you're communicating that out to people so that they know how to use it. Everyone feels comfortable using it instead of just like kind of putting it out and hoping they figure it out. It's really helpful to communicate where those things are and any policies around it. Circulation is another big one too, especially if you have like a rather large space, trying to keep people potentially moving in one direction, or some people have like 2 doors, you can make one in and one out, depending on kind of what the layout of the space is. And we've been trying to help people overlay their space to help come up with solutions for that. And then clean desk policies are really big. They're always really something that people do when they're doing unassigned seating. Just like if people aren't leaving their stuff on the desk, it makes it easier to share and have people on these on and off schedules. But it also makes it easier to clean them and wipe them down every day after people leave. So that's definitely critical, but it is a behavior change, and people might not be used to doing that. So that is something that you want to be reminding people of. And then again, meeting room occupancy, signage of just reducing the amount of people that can be in a meeting room, maybe having cleaning supplies there and having protocols around how that stuff gets cleaned. Even some of the like open meeting space might have rules around it. If a lot of people like are coming back for social interaction, and that might mean collaborating around a whiteboard. So there's like lots of surfaces that people are going to be touching, and just making sure that everyone's comfortable with how are we using these things and how are we all cleaning them is really important.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Christina. And you'll notice the signage there on the right that Christina alluded to. And the second poll question was asking those of you on the line, how far along are you in creating, your respective return to workplace guides? We actually, for those of you who were generous enough to share some time with us today, we're actually going to share our guide with all of you who are on the live line today as part of the follow-up email that goes out tomorrow. So you'll get a chance to see our thinking kind of in writing on paper. And as part of that, we've actually embedded quite a bit of some of that signage in there, which will now be part of the new normal as we start to venture slowly back into the office. So this is obviously a big question that many people on the line are asking. Christina, Maylin, let's assume that there are some on the line who maybe haven't started yet. Where would you recommend they start to spend their time and attention to get this process off the ground?
Yeah, definitely. So that's a lot of information and lots of things to do, but we do have a checklist of things that you can kind of take away from this and just start to understand, review and like follow local government guidance is obviously important and different everywhere. So it's one of the things I know, if you're a company that has offices in different places, you can have like office standards, but then also respecting the local authorities is also key. And then HVAC maintenance and filter change is important. Maylin talked about how we're doing this to our spaces, but just making sure that that's something you're checking, especially the filter part of it. Changing cleaning supplies to make sure they adhere to CDC guidelines is important, and targeting where those wellness stations would be or where you're putting that the cleaning supplies into your space. And then really understanding your building. I think this is the most critical and honestly the most asked question when I've been talking to customers is, what is our building doing? Like I trust my employees. I feel like we can do this like with a lot of these tips and guidance around signage, but we can't control the building. So by just getting in touch with the building, I can say that a lot of the buildings that we're in have already put plans in place, have been sharing all of their guidelines with us, and all those things that are around elevator usage, just like traffic in the lobby, lots of different things around packages. Are people coming up to give packages, or do you have to meet people outside? There's lots of different rules that are happening, and buildings are really thinking about it. So just making sure that you know that stuff, because those are going to be top of mind for your employees. And having the answers is just like a step ahead. And again, like puts that ease on your employees that know like, okay, we already asked these questions. This is how my building works. Like I know everything I need to know when I go back.
I'm leaving this slide up intentionally just for a little bit because there's so much good information on here as well. We're gonna go to Q&A here in the next minute or so, but I want to make sure you guys have a chance to process this. Yeah, you bring up a good point, Christina. There are a lot of things we can't control, right? We can't control here in New York City the subway, and commuting. How we commute will be a big question for many of us. And of course, buildings. Our CEO Mall talks about building health. A lot of buildings in New York are older buildings with not great building hygiene with regards to air and other other materials, small, narrow hallways, elevators. So it'll be interesting. There's an entire ecosystem that will have to adjust, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the coming months and years, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the bike rack thing that Malin brought up is also really interesting too, of like, that's something that maybe people weren't planning that their employees bike to work, but now a lot of people are biking. I mean, I've heard that it's like impossible to buy a bike right now. So everyone's biking, and where do those bikes go? And then also like, I don't know, like, do you change other policies like dress code and other things that maybe you're strict on, but people are like walking or biking to work? It kind of just changes a lot of people's mindset of what the workplace will be.
Yeah, let's we got a couple questions, so let's start now taking them. I think one of them is from David. He's asking, what are you learning from clients in Europe? Obviously, some of our counterparts in Paris and Germany have started to slowly reopen. I know you guys have been spending a lot of time with them. Can you share any specifics on what some of those customers are doing? And was the bike example from a customer in Europe, or was that here in the US?
I think the one was from one of our European customers, and yeah, we're seeing our customers in Germany and in Paris return already. We have, in fact, our Paris team is actually back in the office, and they've been back in the office for I think 2 or 3 weeks now. And our team is handling it with a rotating schedule. There's a portion of the team that has not come back to the office and will continue to work from home for now. I think that's about 20 or 30% of the team, and then the rest of the team is doing the A and B schedule. So part of the team comes in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the other part of the team comes in Thursday, Friday, and they've divided that up based on which teams need to work together, with some flexibility to continue to get those cross touch points with the different A and B teams throughout the week. Yeah.
That's great. Christina, any particular conversations or customers or anecdotes that you found interesting, worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, most of our customers, because of where we are and all this, have been around more of the health and safety thing. But another thing we've heard from Europe, and kind of just has been my prediction and hope for the future of workplace, is what customers are excited about coming back to and what they think the office means. And one of our European customers is really putting an emphasis on brand and culture. And that, I think, is exciting because it's something that brings people to the office and also keeps employees really motivated and engaged. So just hearing that happening in Europe, I think we're a little bit not there yet here, but I think we'll get there. And I think it says a lot about what the future of workplace will be.
Yeah, and what you're looking at now is just some of the ways that Knotel can help, led by experts like Christina and Malin. So if you're looking for assistance as you build out your own version of Return to Workspace, let us know. We're going to share some. There it is. There's some content information. You can actually ask the experts directly. I'm sure Malin and Christina would love to help you out if you've got specific questions or want to bend their ear for a little bit. And of course, we will also be sharing this guide, the one you're looking at right now, for all of you on the line today. Hopefully this helps you. Again, I assume many of you are working on your own versions of this. Our goal, hopefully, over the last 28 minutes, we maybe kind of inspired you or challenged you to think about things a little differently. Hopefully you learned a couple of new things that maybe you weren't thinking about that you can factor into your own guide as well. Let's do one more question while we leave this up, give people a chance just to take this information down. The question is from Sarah. So I guess the convo, Malin and Christina, has been mostly kind of, if we think about this in a now, soon, later, a lot of it has been obviously kind of now, what things, practical things can we do today, tomorrow, as we start to gear up? Let's maybe fast forward a year or so, like as you think kind of 2021 and beyond, any recommendations or just off the cuff thoughts on what you would tell, head of real estate or workplace executives who are thinking about workspace, longer term?
Yeah, this is my favorite topic. But I think that, there's been this push of like the stuff I was just talking about, of like employee engagement and experience and brand and culture and how important that is. But when it comes down to it, I think a lot of times people get scared of what that could mean, which might mean shared desking, everyone has a home, like all these other things. And what has happened recently has really pushed us to all work out of our comfort zone. And we can do it, right? Like people are doing it and they're empowered in ways maybe they weren't before. Maybe they could never work from home before. So that doesn't mean they always are going to work from home, but it really means that the office is going to be a place they go to do work in a different way, which maybe means they don't need their own desk. So it just puts an emphasis on all these other spaces and the importance of the workplace that I think I've always been trying to sell for a long time, but this is really pushing us, I think, faster than we would have gotten there without it.
Yeah, I think it becomes a little bit less about productivity, because I think something that the world is learning through this experience is that we actually have the ability to be productive at home, and we don't need to be heads down at our desks or in a private office necessarily inside of the office in order to be productive. But the thing that everybody is missing is that collaborative and social experience that we had when we were all together in the office. And so I think that the shift maybe for the density of desking versus the amount of collaboration space that you put inside those spaces might change over the next year or couple of years.
Yeah, well, I certainly, for one, look forward to the day when, we can all be in under a roof together, collaborating and brainstorming, maybe at a safe distance. So thank you very much, Maylin and Christina. Excellent insights. I'm confident that people on the line hopefully found the session helpful today. If you have a question, once you read the guide, let us know. We're happy to answer questions and or set up time to explore with you further what your return to workspace plan looks like. Thank you again. Hope you're all staying safe. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thanks.